Welcome to the Well podcast in our new episode on how trauma affects our relationships. How have you seen that the effects of trauma affecting like your patients' relationships? And I found that that's typically why people come to therapy, because they're like, I want to connect and I'm not connecting, or I want a different type or dynamic in my relationships.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on like what was the trauma, right? But in almost any case, it's going to impact the relationships you have, the people you're closest to. And, you know, for example, it could be not being able to trust someone completely, because maybe you have an idea that like they're going to fail you. You know, they're not going to be able to show up when you need them the most. And so you can only open up so much. Maybe you're not as open with them, and you start to feel even more isolated, and you're just like, okay, I'm tired of feeling isolated. So it's part of why they end up coming into therapy, is how can I connect better with people without allowing past things to really get in the way. And so even like part of the healing that we do with EMDR is to connect with other people who were around you or with you during those situations. So for example, sometimes when I'm helping clients recall the memory, they're like, I'm at a stuck point. I don't remember much detail.
Okay.
And, you know, they're like, this is not going to work for me. And I just tell them like, hey, like, it's okay. Like we can figure this out. You weren't there alone when it happened. So sometimes maybe the person wasn't there during the incident, but they still go back to something, right? And so, for example, if something has happened where maybe it was like a drowning accident and you're feeling really traumatized and you don't want to go back to that pool, you don't want to see lifeguard shorts, anything that reminds you about that day, you don't want to experience that anymore, right? So you really repress a lot of those details. But then after being at the pool, you go home and your mom is there, right? And she remembers some things. So part of what I'll do is I'll say, okay, who was around you? Who were you with after the incident? Can you go and ask them, like, how do they recall that memory? How do they recall that incident? And a lot of times they're able to provide some of the pieces to the puzzle that you don't remember. So it's not about just healing alone, right? You need to really bring in your social support, the people who are there to help you when you fall down. So it's very relational. It really helps you not get into that isolating part. It's hard when we isolate. Oh yeah, we're of no help to ourselves.
Yes.
So yeah.
It reminds me, before I opened the Well, I was a forensic psychologist, and it reminds me when I worked with patients that would struggle with psychosis. And I'd always say, something could feel real to you, and it is real to you, but reality is a shared experience. Right. So that was a way I kind of would validate, like, no, this doesn't mean, like, you know, that your memory is flawed, but just maybe bring others' perspectives and see what is reality. And we would call that reality testing. And I remember working with a patient that he was convinced his wife had poisoned him, like he had paranoia. His wife was poisoning him at that time. And, you know, the intervention was bringing the family in and being like helping bring their narratives in to try to like ground his memory. And I thought that was really helpful, because sometimes even when it is scary when you feel like you can't trust your memory. Right. But memories can be very subjective. Yeah. Yes, they can be. And, you know, I remember like, and this could just be, okay, it's not just a me thing. And that's what trauma will make you think. It's just a me thing, right? No, it's a human thing. It's a human thing, right? Like there are times where I'll end up like telling my husband like, no, I didn't do that. Like I didn't say that. And he's like, you literally just said that. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I did, right? And so sometimes we have those little moments of like, did that happen or did it not happen? But when there's someone else who's around to witness it, they can confirm it and say like, yeah, you did say this, or no, you didn't say this.
And so I think based off of what we're going through, what we're dealing with in that moment, we can think that we did something or that we saw something. But if we have someone to witness it, then they can confirm or say, no, that actually didn't happen.
Or fill in the memory.
Yeah.
Because they've done studies of, like, women have sometimes a better memory because memory emotions help you encode.
Yeah.
Because, when your fight or flight or amygdala gets activated, that means, like, something's happened in the environment to remember.
Right.
And women are more connected to their emotions throughout the day, so they remember things. And maybe there's something that you view as maybe a threat that other people do not.
Right.
So, and I know some of my patients will be very aware of, like, men in the room. But if you're not a guy in the room, maybe you don't remember how many men were in the room. Not because there weren't men in the room. It's because your attention wasn't there and then you didn't encode it. So it's just helpful to know, a fuller picture.
Yeah.
I think of that.
Yeah, and in that process too, like the example you gave of bringing in the family, what a better way to heal than allowing your family to be a part of that journey, because it really, when you're dealing with mental health issues, it can feel really isolating, and that can just confirm, like, yeah, it's just you, it's your problem, you're the issue. But when you bring your family in, that's a part of being able to let them into your world, and it brings more connectedness with your family, because now they can start to understand you a little bit better and the pain that you're going through, instead of just saying, oh, she's just locking herself up in her room again.
Yes.
He doesn't want to come to family outings. It's easy for us from the outside looking in to just be like, oh, they just don't want to be involved. Right? But when the family gets a chance to really see the pain that they're dealing with and the struggles that come up for them on a daily basis, then the compassion gets built up for the family.
Oh, yes.
And that's so important. It's so important.
I think that's why there's so much mental health is very very individualized problem. Like now, like, oh, you go to therapy.
Right.
And I've noticed, like, maybe that first part is that, but actually incorporating the family or even having them reconnect to the people is part of the work. In therapy, I work with people that struggle with eating disorders. And a lot of the times people with anorexia, they don't have a conflict about it, and there's a huge part of them that does not want to get better. And so when they come in the room with me, they don't want to connect. And a lot of therapists don't want to maybe work with people with eating disorders because they're like, well, I can't force them or connect. Right. But that lack of connection is part of the wound. And so I start with that. Like this morning, I was telling a patient, I feel like is there anyone in your life that you need? Because in here, I have the impression that you don't need me. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you never come to therapy and ask. Like, I am the one who kind of prompts. Like, how is it not to need me? Right. And she's like, well, I was never allowed to need when I was younger. So I'm really independent now. So me even bringing her neglect trauma as a little girl, she brings that in the room with me. And that's where we start. Yeah. And I told her, like, it will be a really great progress. If you ever in the room, maybe ask of me. That you get to eat, you know what I'm saying? Like, receive from me. Because in anorexia, it's like, I don't need anything. I'm not going to eat. I don't need. It's a defense against needing. Yeah. And so that's actually like a connection relational wound that gets symbolized with food. Yeah. So I think the work is, like, first with the patient, them attaching to you. Yeah. And hopefully then them getting to bring, like, healing that attachment so they get attached to others that are safe.
Yeah, and one of the most common negative beliefs that I've seen with EMDR is, I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to have to ask for help. I don't want to need someone else. I don't want to add more to your load, right? This is our job. We love to be there with people and make the burden lighter, right? But even as their therapist, they're like, I don't want to burden you with this. This is too much. But part of that is being able to let them know, like, this is relational. Like, you don't have to do this alone. And so being able to go back to that attachment of like, I'm not used to being able to go to my parent and say, hey, I'm struggling, right? So why would I do this with anyone else, especially someone who doesn't know me from Adam, right? And so being able to get that attachment wound healed and go into the EMDR is going to be really, really like best combo, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's I think what we specialize here is like depth, attachment. A lot of Christians, I find, they feel guilty for struggling emotionally. Like, if I had enough faith, then I wouldn't have this mental health issue. Or if I had, and I love bringing up the illustration that Jesus, who was the Almighty, who had all the strength, he, like, on his way to the cross was so beaten and so physically weak that he couldn't carry his cross anymore. And he collapsed. That was God, and someone needed to help Jesus carry his cross because he couldn't do it. And if that was God showing us, like, giving us permission, like, it's okay that we carry one another's burdens. Like, God even had, I thought it was such a humble, like, it gives me permission to be human. Because I think Christians sometimes, they feel like if they were doing things right, they wouldn't have have a burden for other people to, you know, it would be prayed away or confessed away.
We're just blessed and highly favored, and that's all we are.
Yeah, like, right? Like that.
There's more to it, though. We're people. We're going to struggle, and we can still have faith in the Lord that he's going to help deliver us through it, and knowing that he wouldn't want us to do it alone, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the healing parts in therapy is that you get to experience every week having a space. Like, this is your space with this person. Right. And they're not going to shame you, and they're going to work through it. And hopefully you love that feeling so much that you will want other people in your life. They're not going to be therapists, but that connection that they're not going to shame you for not being perfect. Right. You know.
Yeah. So. Feeling more confident in sharing and taking up space.
Take up space. Yeah. Especially as girls, we need to take up space. Dare to take up space. Yes. That is all for this week's episode. Our next episode is going to be about trauma and Christian faith interventions in the treatment of trauma. So see you then.